right, we are back for session 2, day 2 of the 2024 6 Million Seeds Child Nutrition Summit. My name is Meryl Fury. I am president and CEO of Plant-Based Nutrition Movement, and we have the honor and pleasure of working the 6 Million Seeds program all year long. It's 6 because we count 6 plant-based food groups. That's fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, legumes, whole grains, and mushrooms. Million because we need at least 1 million children, really 50 million children, to start eating healthy food to make a difference for their health and the health of the planet. And SEEDS is an acronym that stands for Students Educated in Environment, Diet, and Sustainability. So welcome to session 2. Today we will be speaking with CAROLYN May Strickland, who is, well, I'll get into her bio in just a second. Like I said earlier, all of our presenters are just amazing, like overwhelmingly bright and engaged and dedicated and passionate about the subject of taking care of children's health and how it impacts every other area of life. So I'm not going to read CAROLYN's full bio. You can certainly go to the bio page, which will show you there it is, the link. If you want to read all about the speakers and CAROLYN's full bio, you can go there and read. I'll just give you the highlights. So CAROLYN May Strickland is coming to us today from Montgomery, Alabama, where she is experiencing a cold snap that doesn't usually happen in that part of the country. I'm in Wisconsin. It's 20-something degrees here on a regular at this time of year, but not where she is. She's the daughter of Air Force parents. She had the unique experience of living all over the world and attending 10 different schools before graduating high school. She's a licensed clinical social worker, and she has 30 plus years of mental health experience as a clinician, working with families and children living with developmental pediatrics and autism. As a therapist, she understands the emotional factors that influence dietary choices and addresses these in her instruction. She's also a fitness instructor at our local YMCA, and she's a certified Food for Life instructor with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. With that, let me bring CAROLYN on screen. Come on in.
Hi, Meryl.
Hi. Oh my gosh, we're so happy to have you here with us today. CAROLYN is going to be talking about food and behavior, which we're on the subject of food as medicine today. And very often we don't think about how food impacts behavior. And then the flip side, second half of the talk will be about how our behavior can influence what we choose as food.
Kind of, yeah. So the way I look at it is, when you think about food and behavior, you think, well, there are foods that can impact our behavior. But there's also behavior around food, like, especially when we're talking about children and food, we know, sometimes kids are picky, things like that. So, which is different than the food that impacts your behavior. So it's kind of a talk in 2 parts. Part 1 being what foods can impact our behavior and how. And the second part, behavior around food and what to do about that. So
I am so excited for this conversation. I am going to get out of your way and let you get started. Thank you very much. I'll see you.
Okay, can we hold on? Yeah, we got that. Okay. Need to see that. Great. All right. Thank you, Meryl. All right. So like Meryl said, I'm CAROLYN Strickland, and I'm a Food for Life instructor and a certified health and wellness coach. And I've been working with children and families for several decades in different ways. But over the past several years, I've had the experience of being able to teach a lot of classes cooking classes for children through the YMCA here in Montgomery, Alabama. This past summer, I had 90 children in my summer camp, pretty much all at the same time. And so I teach cooking classes. And one of the things that I've been really curious about is the connection between food and behavior. And so, like I said, we'll look at it in 2 different ways, and we'll take a little break in the middle. If you have any questions after the first section, then we can address those before we move on to the second section. So part 1 is the part where we talk about the link between certain foods and child behavior. So attention and focus and behavior in children can be greatly influenced by foods they consume. there are a few particular foods and things found in foods, like food additives, that can impact a child's behavior. But this doesn't mean that every child who eats these foods or the food additives will have behavior problems. And it also doesn't mean that all behavior problems are caused by food or food additives. We know that neither of those things is true. But there are certain things that can have an impact on our children's behavior. So, in this section, we're going to look at sugar. So we know that sugar, especially highly processed sugar, can lead to increased levels of hyperactivity. So highly processed foods like candy, soda, sugary snacks, things like that can cause spikes in blood sugar levels, leading to mood swings and erratic behavior. Research has shown that sugar doesn't cause what the actual disorder known as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So sugar doesn't cause that, but eating a sugary treat, we've probably seen it in our own children, can impact a child's behavior in the short term for sure. And then we have caffeine. So caffeine is a compound found naturally occurring in some plants, and it's added to foods, drinks, and supplements. It works by stimulating the brain, which can lead to noticeable impacts on children's behavior. So in children, caffeine consumption can lead to increased energy levels and even hyperactive behavior, which can look like fidgeting, restlessness, anxiety, irritability, impulsivity, difficulty concentrating. Caffeine intake in children can disrupt their sleep patterns and lead to irritability, anxiety, mood swings. So due to these effects, health professionals like those at Columbia University Medical Center are currently recommending that children under the age of 11 avoid caffeine completely, and that children 12 to 17 limit their caffeine intake to just 100 milligrams a day. And those 100 milligrams need to come within like less than 8 hours away from sleep. So they don't need to be taking in any caffeine within 8 hours of sleep. So according to health professionals, both at Columbia and recently published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, there is apparently no safe amount of caffeine for children under the age of 11. So it's important to remember that caffeine can be found in coffee, obviously, but also in sodas and in, chocolate and in energy drinks and certain teas. So monitoring the intake of caffeine by our children is pretty important and can really impact their behavior. So if parents are noticing significant changes in their children's behavior after having any kind of caffeine intake, whether it be through colas or through chocolate, that kind of thing, then maybe consider eliminating it from their diets just to see if that makes a difference in their behavior. And then we have food additives. So artificial colors, flavors, preservatives. Clearly the picture shows some pretty major artificial colors there and probably some artificial flavors. So certain food additives have been linked to behavior problems in children, including artificial food colors, flavors, preservatives. And studies have shown these additives may contribute to hyperactivity, difficulty concentrating, and other behavioral issues, irritability, that kind of thing. Examples of food additives would be artificial colors. So some of them are linked to, like the ones listed here, are linked to hyperactivity, aggression, irritability, restlessness, and possible worsening of attention deficit disorders. And then we have artificial flavors. So it's interesting when you look at a label for food, you will notice sometimes it just lists, like I've noted here, artificial flavors, but it doesn't tell you what the artificial flavors are. And legally, they don't have to tell you what those artificial flavors are. But the ones that can be of real significant problem could be amyl acetate and vanillin. So amyl acetate is the artificial flavor that gives things a tropical flavor. So you would find it in things like dressings and chips, things that are supposed to taste like something tropical, like pineapple or mango. So those artificial tropical flavors probably contain amyl acetate. And amyl acetate can cause headaches, depression, anxiety. And then we have vanillin, which is not to be confused with vanilla extract. It's totally different. Vanillin with an N on the end is a petroleum byproduct from the paper industry that gives things an artificial vanilla flavor, and it can cause headaches, nausea, breathing problems, and kidney issues. And then we have preservatives. So some preservatives like sodium benzoate and BHA, BHT have been associated with behavior problems in children. Sodium benzoate is an antibacterial and antifungal additive, sometimes used to disguise the taste of low quality food. It can aggravate symptoms of asthma, but it also can react with vitamin C and make benzene. It actually forms benzene, which has been known to cause cancer. The preservatives BHA and BHT have also been associated with behavior problems in children. They're used to prevent fats from going bad or make fatty and oily foods taste better for longer periods of time and last longer on the store shelf. So BHA, which is butylated hydroxyanisole, that's real appetizing sounding, isn't it? BHA is a waxy solid commonly used in snack foods, cookies, and dressings. And then BHT, butylated hydroxytoluene, which is a mouthful and also does not sound very appetizing, is a white powder that's commonly added to cereals, chips, sausage, cookies, vegetable oils, and chewing gum. So both BHA and BHT have been linked to several health issues, including allergic skin reactions and endocrine disruption, in addition to behavior problems. So it's important to note that more research really needs to be done to fully understand the relationship between all these food additives and behavior problems in children. So if you're concerned about the impact of food additives on your child's behavior, you may want to consider limiting or avoiding foods that have any of these compounds in them. And remember that what I said about the artificial flavors, they don't actually have to say what artificial flavors they're using. And most labels just say artificial flavors. So maybe instead just opt for more natural whole foods whenever possible, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, grains. And then we have dairy products. So consuming dairy products, especially cow-based dairy products, and those that are high in sugar and additives may have negative effects on behavior in children. And some of the ways, and if you can't read what that slide says, it says, well, I've got his test results and I'm afraid he's allergic to dairy. All right. So the way in which that might happen with behavior would be lactose intolerance, which, if you've ever experienced lactose intolerance, you know that you might experience digestive issues like bloating, gas, diarrhea, stomach discomfort, which can lead to irritability and changes in mood in children. And then there's allergies and sensitivities, which can be like skin rashes, respiratory problems, but also behavior issues like hyperactivity and irritability. There's a pretty high sugar content in some dairy products, especially like flavored milks, yogurts, ice creams, that kind of thing. And we know that eating things that are artificially high in sugar or processed sugars can lead to a spike in blood sugar levels and then a crash as that comes out of your system. That roller coaster effect actually can result in children in mood swings, probably in adults too, but mood swings, irritability, and decreased concentration. And then additives and hormones, like we've just talked about, all those additives, you can frequently find artificial colors and flavors in dairy products, but also hormones. So cows are frequently injected with hormones, and that can also be in then what they're drinking or eating that's a dairy product and can potentially impact their behavior. The high fat content too is just something to really keep in mind. We don't really need to be consuming quite that much fat that you might find in ice cream and whole fat milks, that sort of thing. So it's pretty important to monitor your child's intake of dairy and note any changes that might be happening with their behavior. But we also know that cow-based dairy products are really best for baby cows, and plant-based milks are better for humans. So calcium levels is something I think people worry about, getting calcium from dairy. They think they have to have cow-based dairy to have calcium, but frequently plant-based milks are fortified with calcium. But you can also find calcium in leafy greens like collards and kale, and in beans, almonds, tofu, broccoli. It's just found in an abundance of natural foods. So, but do consult with your healthcare provider if you think that that might be a concern. They also do make, calcium supplements, but I just don't think that that's really necessary for children when they're eating a whole food plant-based diet with a lot of leafy greens and that kind of thing. There is some good news. So the good news is that nutrient-dense foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins like beans and tofu, mushrooms, nuts and seeds, those six things we talked about, can support cognitive function and promote positive behavior in children. In a recent study published in the British Medical Journal, elementary school age children who ate 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables a day had higher mental health well-being scores than children who didn't eat fruits or vegetables. And those eating a solid breakfast had higher mental health well-being scores than those not eating breakfast or just having an energy drink for breakfast, which probably had that caffeine that we just talked about. Some specific foods that especially aid in brain health and in subsequently, when you have a healthy brain, in healthy behavior, are foods that are rich in antioxidants like berries and citrus fruits. Antioxidant-rich foods have a variety of brain benefits like increased concentration, brain cell function, and overall better mental health. So eating the rainbow, like pictured there, that beautiful rainbow of food, eating the rainbow is really important. Not Skittles and Fruit Loops, but like the actual growing rainbow of food. You can tell when something's rich in antioxidants when you cut it open and it doesn't turn brown very quickly. So if you think about cutting open an orange or a grapefruit or a lemon, you can let that sit on the counter for hours and it's not going to turn brown. And that's because it has a lot of antioxidants in it. So that's one good way to know that you're eating an antioxidant-rich food. And then we have foods containing omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in things like navy beans, walnuts, flax and chia seeds, and spinach. Foods high in omega-3 fatty acids have been found to improve mood and memory and aid in focus and concentration in children. And then foods containing magnesium, like beans or legumes, nuts, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, flax, and oatmeal are helpful in brain development and learning. And then we want to say a special word about vitamin D here, because low levels of vitamin D in children and adults have been linked to depression. So you do want to assure that your child is getting adequate vitamin D. So there are really 2 main ways to get vitamin D. And one would be through the sun. So when we have sun exposure on our skin, our bodies create a hormone, vitamin D. And also you can get vitamin D through fortified foods and supplements. So the idea with the sun is that it's probably the way we were meant to do it, but most of us are inside all the time and covered in clothing. And so we're not really getting enough vitamin D that way. And then too much sun exposure can lead to skin damage. So it's probably safer for your skin anyway to get it through vitamin D supplemented foods, or even a vitamin D supplement. That's something to talk to your healthcare provider about. But many plant-based milks are fortified with vitamin D, so do be sure to read food labels. And looking at the connection between our gut and brain. So the brain and the gut are very connected, and the gut microbiome, which is the good bacteria in our intestines, plays a crucial role in mood regulation and behavior. So eating things like probiotic rich foods like soy, almond, or coconut milk yogurts can support a healthy gut microbiome and potentially improve behavior in children. There's other things like plant-based yogurts, probiotic rich foods like sauerkraut, miso, pickled vegetables, sourdough breads, kimchi, tempeh, that kind of thing. So trying to incorporate those, once or twice a week at least into your child's diet would be probably a good idea. But we do have some practical tips here. So you do want to limit or avoid completely the highly processed foods, sugary foods, those things with food additives like we talked about. And then definitely dairy and caffeine are things we should probably be avoiding completely. With the caffeine, especially age 11 and under, just no caffeine is probably the best idea. And then really emphasize the whole foods, eating the rainbow, eating naturally, growing foods, and then possibly keeping a food journal. So if you think there might be behavior issues associated with what your child is eating, it's a good idea to maybe start writing down everything they eat for a couple of weeks, but also write down at the same time what their mood and behavior was like during that time to see if you can pick out any patterns. Like every time they go over to their friend's house next door and they come back just off the wall, hyperactive and irritable, well, what are they eating every time they go over there might be a good question to find out. So, okay. So we'll take a quick break right here and let me ask Meryl if there's any questions we need to address before we move on to food behavior issues surrounding food. Do we have any questions at this point?
Not from the audience. No, I have a question though.
Okay.
Now, I am a pretty well diehard chocolate fan. It's something that I eat almost every day.
Okay. Me too. Yeah. I do love my chocolate. Yep.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I know chocolate is a favorite thing among kids.
We're over 11. We're okay.
Right. Thank goodness. Oh my gosh. Right? But I'm thinking, the average kid probably gets a fair amount of chocolate in a week. If it's between chocolate cereals, chocolate milk, chocolate ice cream, I'm sure there's a plenty. So if it's an 8 hour, you said within 8 hours, let's say they're over age 11.
Yeah.
So that would mean that they'd almost have to have like chocolate for breakfast and then not anymore for the rest of the day if they're looking to avoid caffeine.
So that's people like children 12 to 17 can have 100 milligrams.
Okay.
Probably safely, at least according to some of the more recent research. So that does mean, though, like 8 hours before they go to bed, let's say they go to bed at 10 o'clock, then 2 o'clock in the afternoon would be, the cutoff right there. And if they're younger, like they're 12 years old, they should probably be going to bed closer to, 8:30 or 9. Then that's 12:30 or 1 in the afternoon, so it's earlier in the day. So, and that's the problem is that a lot of times, people stop on their way home from school and pick up their child, a coffee at Starbucks, drive through the coffee. I mean, and then you wonder why they're not sleeping at night. That's why, because they do need 8 hours to clear it out of their systems. So, and we're grown-ups. So having larger bodies than a 12-year-old, we can handle a little more caffeine than that, but still, even I've noticed, like if I have anything with caffeine in it after like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't sleep well at night. So, I try to limit my chocolate, and I do love chocolate, but I do try to limit it to morning and mid-morning and maybe a bite of chocolate right after lunch. And then that's it. And, I definitely don't drink coffee in the afternoon. And usually actually I drink decaf coffee because there's still a tiny bit of caffeine that's for me. So, and some people are a lot more impacted by caffeine than others. So I know I really feel caffeine a lot when I drink a regular coffee. I am just like I guess, So
never mind an espresso or something like that.
My gosh, I was just in Italy and I drank an espresso. That was a bad idea. I was like bouncing off the walls because I can't normally handle that, and then I got a headache. So there's definitely connection with caffeine and headaches too. So, especially in kids.
So one other question, one of the things you said about, okay, two questions. You were talking about BHA, BHT.
Mm-hmm.
I had never heard that sodium benzoate plus vitamin C would lead to...
It forms benzene.
Wow. Yeah. And benzene is like, no, don't have that.
It's
right?
a carcinogen, yes.
It is like plastered all over every label that might have benzene in it.
Yes. So yeah, you want to avoid things with benzene and sodium benzoate, but unfortunately it's not like, okay, so if you're eating fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, nuts, and seeds and mushrooms, you're probably not going to come in touch with sodium benzoate very often. But if you're eating things off the shelf that are highly processed, like, those super processed foods, like, I don't want to call any manufacturers names, but like, there's really popular cookies that do not appear to have any grains or anything in them. They're, yeah. I don't want to call out a manufacturer, which is why I tried on my slides to really hide manufacturer names. But yeah, so super highly processed foods that are high in processed sugars and those kind of things that can stay on the shelf at the store for 2 years.
Yes.
It's the sodium benzoate and the BHA and the BHT that are keeping those things from going bad. Wow. So that's why avoiding those kinds of things is probably really important, especially for children, and unfortunately, they're the ones who are probably eating most of that stuff.
Probably.
So yeah, and that's just, who knows how much is in there, especially those artificial flavors, because by law, they don't have to tell you what the flavors are. It just says artificial flavors, which is really scary. So could be.
One other question, because when you were talking about the flavor thing. So vanillin, you said, is a byproduct of the paper industry?
It's a petroleum-based byproduct of the paper industry, which is so weird because apparently it has a vanilla-like flavor to it. But it's not vanilla. So anything from a vanilla bean, perfectly fine. But vanillin with the N on it is not a real thing that we want to eat. But
right. Who comes up with the ideas to eat stuff out of a petroleum-based byproduct from the paper industry? Why would you put that in your mouth? I don't know.
I can't imagine.
I also heard that the artificial vanilla flavor, and I could be wrong. I could be not remembering this correctly. But one of the artificial vanilla flavors is something that is expressed from the anal glands of beavers.
So, yes, that's right. Yeah, that's,
another one. Like, why are we putting this in our mouth? I don't know.
Well, shellac is the same thing. So shellac is actually from bugs. It comes from, I forget the name of the bug, but they're little. Yeah. So if you see, I guess you most frequently see shellac in candy, like candy coated almonds and things like that. If they have a real shiny coating on it, that's probably shellac that actually comes from bugs, which is, and I forget how they get it out of the bugs, but I know they don't live through it. So, it's kind of it's pretty horrifying to think the things that people eat. I don't know, but I guess if you want shiny food, then
Lord, how I have loved shiny food.
Honestly, the only thing I can think of is chocolate covered almonds, but I guess, possibly things like those little chocolate candies.
Or like,
I don't know.
There's some gummy candies that have shiny exteriors.
It does make you wonder. Yeah, that's just why it's so important to read food labels. And I think people just go, oh, I like that and I like that. And they just don't even think about reading what's in it that you're putting in your body.
Well, so much of the time we think if it's on the shelf, well, somebody's checking it, aren't they? We have a Food and Drug Administration, we have a USDA, we have a CDC, we have all these agencies, these 3-letter agencies that are there to protect us and keep us safe.
Hopefully we'll
they wouldn't be allowing carcinogens on the shelf, especially in the form of baby food or child,
You would think. You would think. Yeah. I mean, that's just why I always say the best baby food is basically what you're eating and mash it up. Because,
Yes,
you know,
our guest this morning said. Yes,
yeah. I mean,
you'll
I,
know what's in it.
I gave my kids when they were 6 months old and barely had like maybe one tooth, probably didn't even have teeth yet. I gave them corn on the cob, and which sounds crazy, but they just sucked on it and they loved it.
Yeah,
You know, they wanted what we were eating, and the stuff out of the jar. If you ever taste that stuff, I mean, I tasted it and said, I'm not giving you that. I mean,
yeah,
eating. So yeah,
right.
I mean, it makes a lot more sense. So
Yes.
yeah, they want to do what we're doing anyway. They learn by, seeing what we're
Yeah,
doing.
but by imitating for sure.
Exactly.
Well, we will let you get on to part 2 now.
All
So
right.
we'll step away. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. So common behavior issues related to food. So yes, eating habits can have a significant impact on a child's health and well-being. So making it really important to address any behavior issues that involve eating. Got to address those pretty quickly. I do want to make a note that there are eating disorders. So these are behavioral issues related to food that are kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. So anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorders. There are several other types, but those are the ones that most people recognize. So they're beyond the scope of this talk. So for our purposes today, what I'm actually talking about more in depth is more common behavior problems associated with eating. So if you are concerned that your child might have a symptom of an eating disorder, please contact their healthcare provider. But looking at more common behavior problems, we look at picky eating. And if that slide's too small for you to read, it says, "Oh, excuse me, today you don't like bananas? I'm sorry. I must have confused you with the toddler that ate 3 entire bananas yesterday." So many children go through phases of picky eating where they may refuse certain foods and only want to eat a limited variety of foods. Now, this is seriously frustrating for parents and probably frustrating for the child too, but it's often a very normal part of a child's development. So the American Academy of Pediatrics says children need to try something up to 15 times before they actually are willing to eat it, which I think there's some theories about why that is. One of them is that we are just born with this innate fear of being poisoned. And so sometimes tasting things several times to make sure it's not going to kill you is probably where that came from. But picky eating usually just targets a few different foods, and it really doesn't affect your child's overall appetite or their growth and development. So that's important to note because picky eating should not be impacting your child's growth and development. Picky eating usually will go away as the child grows and matures. So when I referred to eating disorders a second ago, there is an eating disorder that's more newly recognized that looks a lot like picky eating. So I want to differentiate that from picky eating. It's called the avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, and it's a more newly recognized eating disorder with the acronym ARFID, ARFID, ARFID. It's not related to body image like anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder they're related to body image. ARFID is not related to body image. So what happens with this eating disorder is it causes a child to lose interest in eating because they're afraid of something about eating, like the consequences of eating, like they're terribly afraid of choking or they're afraid of vomiting. And so it's more of an anxiety-related food disorder around behavior with food like choking and vomiting. Also, there are certain types of ARFID where if a child doesn't like certain colors, so they won't eat anything green or they won't eat anything yellow, or there's certain tastes they don't like, textures they don't like, smells they don't like. So anorexia and bulimia are body image related, but ARFID is not. But it's similar to anorexia and bulimia in that it can cause complications, like even life-threatening complications if it's left untreated. So the big difference between picky eating and ARFID is that picky eating does not impact a child's growth and development. They're not falling off the growth chart, where ARFID actually does impact a child's growth and development. So again, if you're concerned that your child, if their picky eating has crossed the line and is starting to impact their growth and development, please discuss that with their pediatrician. But typically picky eating is something that children grow out of. So hopefully as they grow and mature. And then we have food refusal. So some children may just outright refuse to eat certain foods or whole categories of foods, which leads parents to feel very frustrated, and children too. But it leads to mealtime battles and stress. But food refusal can be a sign of some underlying issues like sensory sensitivities, like, for example, if something's too crunchy or it's too mushy, or it can be a sign of anxiety in a child. So, but it, again, does not last long enough to impact the child's growth and development. And that part is really important. So if you notice an impact with their food behavior impacting their growth and development, that's time to talk to the pediatrician about it. So typically children who are picky eaters or who refuse whole categories of foods will mature and grow out of the behavior. So patience is important. And again, if that's too small for you to read, it says, me at age 98, finally remembering that one time I made a meal and all 3 of my kids ate it. All right. And then we have kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, which is overeating. Some children may actually struggle with overeating or even emotional eating, which can lead to weight issues and an unhealthy relationship with food. So overeating can be a coping mechanism for stress, boredom, and other emotions. Overeating is really complicated by brain chemistry. So there's a neurotransmitter called dopamine that plays a key role in what we're eating and how we feel about food. So looking at our happy little brain here, so the happy chemistry agents that happen in our brains are oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, and dopamine. The one, oxytocin is the love one, where you feel some oxytocin released when you hug someone you love. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about dopamine in particular. So dopamine, the one on the top right, is related to food because it is the reward chemical. So certain foods that are high in sugar, fat, and salt are really effective at triggering dopamine release, which is why we sometimes refer to those as comfort foods. So it's important to note that the relationship between food and dopamine can be a problem. Consuming highly palatable, calorie-dense foods on a regular basis can lead to changes in the dopamine system, potentially contributing to overeating and weight gain. This is why some people may turn to food for emotional comfort or as a way of coping with stress and negative emotions. So it's really important to not use food as a reward for this particular reason, and we're going to discuss that more in just a second. But ultimately, the connection between food and dopamine is very complex. So while certain foods can temporarily boost dopamine levels and provide a sense of pleasure, it's important to maintain a balanced diet and be mindful of how those food choices impact our mental health. Okay, so we have some ideas that can help here. So we're going to look at the first one, which is establishing a routine. Creating a consistent mealtime routine can help children feel more secure and make meal times predictable. Just like having a morning routine, like as you're getting ready for school, or having a bedtime routine. Having any kind of routine around mealtime is a good way to set boundaries and help children feel secure in their environments. So offering meals and snacks at regular intervals can help prevent overeating and grazing throughout the day as well. And then we want to encourage exploration, encouraging your child to try new foods and flavors by introducing a variety of options at meal times. Take them grocery shopping with you. And maybe when you go to the grocery store, tell them ahead of time, hey, pick out a fruit you've never tried before, or a vegetable you've never tried before, maybe one that you haven't tried yet either, and you can learn about it together. But that's kind of a fun way to learn about some new foods, encourage exploration, find a new fruit, like maybe they've never tried cherimoya or mango. Or a papaya. So that could be a fun thing to learn about together. Another example of exploration with food would be to plant seeds and grow your own vegetables in your yard or even pots on your patio, like cherry tomatoes, herbs, green beans. Those kinds of things are pretty easy to grow in pots. If the option of growing it yourself isn't really feasible for you, then maybe try to visit a local farm or even a farmer's market to learn about what foods are in season and what's growing in your area. And you can even talk to the farmer and ask all about it. But there's plenty of small farmers who really do love to have people come out and visit their farms. And that's a lot of fun for kids to go see how that food got from the farm to their plate. And then getting your child involved with giving them responsibility, getting them involved in meal preparation and grocery shopping to foster a sense of ownership over their food choices can really help, especially with pickiness. For example, you could have your elementary school age child take the responsibility for choosing what the family will eat one night a week or one night a month, including writing out the grocery list needed for what they're making or helping to make, and then having them prepare their meal, the meal they chose for the family, including cutting, measuring, and cooking the food, setting the table, and then calling the rest of the family to come to dinner. So when they have ownership over what they're making, it will help them to be more interested in eating what they just made. That was something my mom did with me actually when I was 8 years old. And she said, you know what, one night a week, you get to pick what the family is eating and you can help make it. And so that was part of where I started my love of cooking, was when I was about 8 years old. I had to start thinking about and looking through cookbooks and figuring out what were we going to make for the family that one night that week. So that was kind of a fun way to do that. And then we want to offer choices, especially for children who are too young to help with the meal prep I just talked about, like cutting things. At least offer choices. So maybe have a toddler help choose between two healthy options for dinner, like, would you like to have spaghetti with marinara sauce and some roasted broccoli, or black bean burgers and sweet potato wedges for dinner? And so giving them choices makes them feel like they got to choose, but you were actually the one who gave them the two options to choose from. So you're still in charge, you're still the parent, but giving them some ownership over the choices they are making can help decrease pickiness if they get to actually choose between two things. And then we also want to model healthy eating habits. So children learn by example. So as parents, we need to be sure to model healthy eating habits by including a variety of nutritious foods in our own diets. I didn't realize until I was an adult how very picky my father was as an eater, because he refused entire categories of foods like salads, most vegetables, and probably most fruits. I wasn't exposed to a lot of the fruits and vegetables that I eat now. When I was little, didn't even know some of them existed, because my mother was always just trying to make my father happy and just making things he liked. And so, for example, I never even tried a stir fry. I never tried even one Asian dish until I was in college, because my father didn't like that. So I never got exposed to it. So I think I was a picky eater, probably in no small part because of my father's example, or maybe bad example. So definitely try, if you are a picky eater yourself, maybe try branching out a little bit and setting that example for your child. Involving peer learning is just super important. So peer learning related to food pickiness in children can have a positive and negative effect. But on the positive side, children can be influenced by their peers to try new foods that they see others eating and enjoying. The peer influence can sometimes help children expand their food preferences and become more open to trying different foods. So if you know someone who has a child who's not very picky and eats lots of fruits and vegetables, spending more time with that friend during meal times might be a good idea. But there is the negative side of it too. If they have friends who are super picky, then that can kind of rub off on them too. So I teach a lot of classes, like I said, at the YMCA, and peer learning is something that I really try to incorporate. And I do have some ground rules. So if you look at the picture in the top left, they're having some green smoothies. In the middle, they're all fixing their own bowls of oatmeal. And on the right, well, we made pasta salad. So I have some ground rules, which are we're not allowed to say things like, yuck, gross, that's disgusting. But they can say instead, no, thank you. No, thank you. And so sometimes I get some pretty vehement, no, thank you, when they don't want to try something. But I have noticed that one of the ways to really get kids to try something different and new is to make it into a smoothie, which is why the green smoothies have been super popular. And I'll show you the green smoothie in just a second. I have the recipe here for you. The oatmeal is, if you can see in that picture, it's a big table with all the toppings. And so the oats are already made. Like I said, I have 90 kids that I'm dealing with. So I go ahead and cook the oats. They are actual whole rolled oats made with just water in a big crock pot. And they get a bowl with that. And they can pick any topping. They need to pick at least 3. And I have things like chopped apples, chopped pears, raisins, cranberries, nuts, toasted coconut, a little cinnamon, maple syrup, just all kinds of different blueberries, strawberries, all kinds of toppings. They need to pick at least 3. And I never fail to be amazed every summer at how many children tell me they've never had real oatmeal. They've only had the kind out of the packet that you pour boiling water over. So when they try real oatmeal, they really like it. And I get parents every year calling and texting me saying, how did you get my child to ask me for real oatmeal? Like, what on earth? And then pasta salad, same thing. The pasta's already cooked, but we have a table full of toppings. So that's a way to incorporate that at your house would be go ahead and cook the pasta, have it available, and then lots of toppings for them to choose from. They need to pick at least 3, and the toppings include things like peas, corn, chopped carrots or shredded carrots, beans, kidney beans, garbanzo beans, chopped tomatoes, celery, green onions. There's just so many different really great toppings to put on a pasta salad. And then some low-fat Italian dressing, and they put maybe a tablespoon or 2 and stir it up, and they've made their own pasta salad. I had a little boy tell me this past summer, I think I could show my mom how to make pasta salad. And I said, I think you could too, which is the exact reason we're doing this. So when kids go home and tell their parents, I can make my own pasta salad, let me show you how. And they go and with their parents to the grocery store and buy the stuff. It's a big win. So getting them involved in choosing what they're going to eat is super important. But also at the Y, I've noticed that when they see each other eating something healthy, they're more likely to try it. I had one little boy a few years ago who'd never tasted broccoli in his entire life. He told me it was disgusting. And I said, nope. We don't use that word. No, thank you. And so he said, no, thank you. I don't want broccoli. But he saw everybody else trying it at his table. And he said, okay, I'll try it. And he ended up loving broccoli, and he took the rest home with him. So that was a huge win. So here's my green monster smoothie recipe. This is the one we start out every summer camp with. It's a Vitamix recipe, but very popular. It's just water, green grapes, pineapple chunks. They could be frozen, 4 cups of spinach and a banana and some ice cubes. Whirl it up, and it's just such a hit. Every single summer, the kids just adore it. So there's the recipe for you if you want to take a screenshot, because or you can just go to Vitamix recipes, green monster smoothie, but really popular with kids. They just love it. So I said a little while ago, we talk about using food as a reward or punishment. So that's super important. We want to focus instead on promoting a healthy relationship with food. So when we use food as a reward or a punishment, a reward, an example would be, you can have a chocolate chip cookie if you clean your room. And on the opposite side of that, the flip side or punishment would be something like, you can't have a chocolate chip cookie unless you clean your room, which holds out over them a potential reward. We're promoting an unhealthy relationship with food when we use food like that. It can lead to an association between food and emotion, which leads to emotional eating and unhealthy eating habits. Children might start to view then food as a source of comfort or a way to cope with stress rather than as nourishment. When food is used as a reward, it can make children really learn to eat when they're not hungry because they just want the reward. which can contribute to overeating and weight management issues. So it also, if you stop and think about it, really fosters reward-seeking behavior, and it reinforces the idea that certain foods are less valuable than other foods. So if we say something like, you can't have a cookie until you finish your broccoli, then what that does is set up the idea that broccoli isn't desirable, which is kind of the opposite of what we want, right? Like, we want our kids to enjoy eating broccoli more than they enjoy eating cookies. I mean, they're not going to get a lot of nutrients from cookies, and we want them to be healthy and strong. We want them to like broccoli. So if you don't eat your broccoli, you can't have a cookie, makes broccoli sound bad. And that's kind of the opposite of what we wanted to do with them. So it also misses the opportunity to teach them healthy habits. So what they really want from us is our time and our attention. Food is really kind of second best to what they actually want from us, right? So they actually crave our time and attention, and food used as a reward can set up the idea that somehow food is their comfort. And that's kind of the opposite of what we want to do. So instead, when we're trying to change a child's behavior, dangling food as a reward or punishment is really not the best option. Maybe coming up with something along the lines of, hey, when you finish cleaning your room, we can go to the park and spend some time together, or we can go to the library and pick out a book for us to read together. So that's probably a better option than using food. And it's actually an issue that I see a lot of adults still dealing with, whose parents used food as a reward with them. So again, the bottom line is kids really want our time and attention, and food rewards are usually second best to what they actually want. So if you think your child's behavior issues are actually causing significant stress or impacting their health and development, their growth, they're falling off the growth chart, then do consider seeking support from a pediatrician or a registered dietitian or a clinical psychologist. These professionals can provide personalized guidance and intervention to address any underlying issues regarding food and healthy eating habits. So yeah, in conclusion, common behavior problems related to eating can be challenging to navigate, but with patience, consistency, and support, they can be addressed effectively. So we need to understand the reasons behind their behaviors and implement strategies to promote a positive relationship with food, and we can help teach our children some long-lasting, healthy eating habits. So practical tips would be establishing a routine, encouraging exploration, giving responsibility, offering choices, modeling those healthy habits ourselves, incorporating peer learning when you can find other kids who are really good eaters and get them to spend time together, avoiding food as a reward, and seeking professional help. So thank you. And I'd love to know if there's any questions. Here you are.
Yeah, here I am. Here I am. We do not have any questions, I don't think. Let me just check. I don't see any questions from the audience. Now, I always have questions.
Okay.
I sometimes wonder why do I always have questions? But that's just another question. So never mind. So I want to know about picky eating. So much stuff in my head about picky eating.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to somebody a couple days ago. She's originally from Macedonia.
Mm-hmm.
She had read a book called French Kids Eat Everything.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that in this book, I have not read it myself, but she said that in France, there's not this experience or this thing, this entity called picky eating, right? Kids eat what is put in front of them for the most part. They have way broader palates, willing to the neophobia, the fear of new things doesn't seem to be an issue like it can be here.
Right.
So
that's not just France. That's a lot.
Tell us a little bit more about picky eating as a, and I'm going to call this is going to kind of put it in a particular context, as a cultural phenomenon
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the United States.
Yes, yes, very much. So I was kind of assuming most people watching would be in the United States.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yes. So have you noticed when you go to a restaurant and they have a children's menu, what it has on it? As if we assume that children will not eat food that we eat.
Right,
So
right.
they
Yeah.
have children's menus with garbage on them. So it's
And
always
the same garbage everywhere you go.
garbage.
Everywhere you go.
So I think one of the problems with picky eating is that most Americans just assume that kids are picky
Mm,
and that kids only want chicken nuggets and pizza. And so
right.
that's all we offer them. And then somehow I think it's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy that we just assume they're picky, therefore they're picky.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's when my son was 2, and that was a long time ago because he's 29 now and he's expecting his first child. So I'm about to be a grandma.
Right.
We were at a restaurant and he was eating broccoli because he loved broccoli. We called them baby trees, but so, eat your baby tree. And so he's sitting at the restaurant just eating his baby trees and he was very happy. And a lady looked over and she said, "How old is he?" And I said, "He's 24 months." And she said, "How on earth did you get him to eat broccoli without cheese sauce on it?" And I said, "I've never given it to him with cheese sauce on it. Like, why would I do that?" And she was just floored. She was floored. But I'd been giving him broccoli since he got teeth. And before he had teeth, I just mashed it up and gave him broccoli. Like, I'd never made the assumption that my child was picky. And so I think that it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I do think that people just assume children are picky, which is why they have children's menus that are full of garbage, because kids are picky. So they give them picky eating food. And I have known, believe me, I've known lots of seriously picky children. But in fact, a friend of mine down the street had a child my son's age, and she would purposely try to have her child have meals with my child because my child wasn't a picky eater. And so her child was horribly picky, seriously wouldn't eat anything but pizza and chicken nuggets.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so, like, that was all she would eat. And so she was always around my child because my child would then, I would tell him, "Hey, we need to help your friend to show her that broccoli and apples and things like that are good and healthy for her." And he's like, "Okay." And so he would say, "Here, would you like a bite of my apple? Here, would you," he tried to help too.
Yeah,
So,
right. Good
but
guy.
yeah, I mean, I just think it's a problem of we just assume children are picky and give them junk.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
getting them to eat anything.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I wonder too. So we assume children are picky. I totally agree with that. And maybe their parents have also been picky in the same way. So it's sort of passed to the next generation in that assumption. I was picky, therefore you will be picky.
exactly.
The other thing is too, okay, so Carolyn, you and I are around about the same age-ish, I believe. My mother did not allow for that. There was no allowing of picky. Now I understand the when there's an eating disorder, there's a sensitivity to certain textures, or things make you gag, or
Right.
The ARFID like you're talking about. I mean, there's seriously times when there's need for professional help, right?
Absolutely.
Pathologists get involved, and medical professionals and things like that. But I also believe parenting styles have changed over time.
Dramatic.
And we don't necessarily ask mom or grandma or our aunt or our somebody else, how did you handle it? Did you ever run up against this situation where the child will only eat chicken nuggets? Well, no, they haven't, because chicken nuggets weren't a thing when you and I were kids, right?
Exactly.
And chicken, yep, you're going to eat that. My mother used to say, you're going to learn how to eat that off the bone, right? We're not even going to take the bone out. You're going to learn how to handle the bone. And that was how it started.
Right. Yep.
I think the other thing is too, that there is, when we first give children solids, and for quite a while, they're learning how to control the muscles of their mouth.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So if I give a little kid broccoli or spinach or sweet potatoes or squash or whatever the heck else we're giving them today, and you put it in their mouth and they go, there's a certain amount of that is that, okay, they might be spitting it out on purpose. And then again, they might just not know how to keep it in their mouth.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So I think we equate certain things like that to mean they don't like it. And if I give it to them again, they're going to cry or smack the bowl off the tray or whatever they're going to do, which means that maybe I'm a bad parent, or maybe I'm mean, or maybe they won't love me, or maybe, you know, and we start equating behaviors that are normal eating, learning behaviors with other things that they're not necessarily really associated with.
Exactly. I mean, when you introduce a new texture to a baby, you know, something completely different than anything they've tried before. So if all they've ever had is breast milk and then mushed up stuff, the first time they get something that's not mushed up, they may just go,
right.
What to do with it. So interestingly, I was just thinking about, I think I've seen some research that babies who are breastfed have fewer oral motor sensitivities than babies who are bottle fed, because it's harder to get milk out of a human nipple than it is to get it out of a plastic nipple.
Yes.
And so the muscles in their mouths, like you were referring to, don't necessarily develop quite as well in babies who aren't breastfed. And so they tend to have more gag, more sensitivity to certain textures and things in their mouth. So also to flavors, because so the thing about breast milk is it's got the flavors of what the mom ate. And so when I was breastfeeding, I ate lots of garlic and like lots of really strongly flavored things. So my child's getting those flavors too. And my kids were never picky eaters, like ever. And so, but I've had an awful lot of friends, niece and nephew, shouldn't say that, but you know, niece and nephew who are super picky eaters. But you know, I ate lots of highly flavorful things when I was pregnant and I breastfed. So, you know, I think kids that are bottle fed, that flavor doesn't change. There's just one flavor of formula. And so I do think kids who are breastfed tend to be less picky eaters. They're more likely to try something new or have tasted it before because they had it in breast milk. And so that was really interesting research to me just a few years ago from, I think it was American Academy of Pediatrics, that said babies need like up to 15 times of trying something before they're willing to actually eat it, which probably comes from that innate, you know, fear of poisoning yourself. And so that our prehistoric ancestors probably tasted stuff like, that looks like a good berry, and let me just taste it and make sure it doesn't kill me.
Right.
I lived for 24 hours. Okay, I'm gonna have another nibble of it, and it might take like 15 tries before okay, it's not going to kill me, and it tasted okay. So, you know, maybe that's where that's coming from. I don't think anybody really knows, but it does seem to be 15 tries is about the, you know, number of tries before a baby might actually eat some, or a toddler might actually eat something, which is an interesting thought. I don't know how they're going to ever figure that one out, but
yeah, they may not ever, you know. And then on some level, like, okay, it's okay if you don't figure it out, right? Just know that just because the baby goes bleh doesn't mean that you're a bad mom. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try again.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean the child, you know, absolutely already has it figured out that they will never eat broccoli ever in their life. They're going to be picky from now on.
Right.
Kids are 10 months old. Don't worry. Try again. Try again.
Like I was mentioning, that little boy who was 9 years old and didn't eat broccoli, you know, and he said, "Oh, that's disgusting." And I said, "Okay, you know, you don't have to pick the broccoli, but pick at least 3 other toppings." And seeing everybody else try broccoli, he said, "Okay, Miss Carolyn, I will try broccoli." And I said, "Wait a minute, you've never tried broccoli? How did you know it was disgusting then? If you'd never tried it?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I just thought it was." And I said, "Well, if you're going to try it, yeah, go ahead. I mean, you can have some, take a piece just take one piece and try it." And I have a trick with broccoli and kids. I never give it to them raw. because raw broccoli just is a little more strongly flavored. And there's something about that super crunchy texture that kids just really don't like sometimes. So I parboil it, like boiling water, 1 minute or less in the boiling water, take it out and put it in freezing cold water, stop the cooking. It's still bright green. It's still crunchy, but it's not that super, super crunchy. And it does take away a little bit of the overwhelming taste that broccoli can have when it's raw. And they love it, just love it that way. So I had a big Ziploc bag of it, and he said, "Do you have any broccoli left?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Can I take it home with me?" I said, "You sure can."
Right.
He walked out just eating my popcorn. But he said to me, "How come my mother never gives me broccoli?" And I said, and in my head, I'm thinking, woo, I got to go like diplomatic response here. Let's see. Maybe she doesn't know how good it is.
Right.
And he said, "Well, I'm going to tell her." And I said, "Okay." So he brought it home to be able to share with his mom. "This is good, Mom. Try it."
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I said, so many of us adults have our own, like my kids say, unclaimed baggage about around food, you know?
Yep.
And we hand that unclaimed baggage off to our kids, you know.
Exactly. My dad did it to me. My dad did it to me. I mean, my dad was such a picky eater, and it didn't hit me until I was in college. Wait a minute. My dad's a picky eater. Like it didn't dawn on me because there were certain things we just couldn't eat at home, like salad. We just didn't have salads when I was little because my dad would not eat a salad. Also, I mean, he ate green beans. I'm trying to think of the very limited amount of foods he would eat. He ate green beans. Let me think. Corn, peas,
Potatoes.
Yeah. Occasionally sweet potatoes. I think it had to be Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Okay.
Have a sweet potato
with marshmallows on top.
With marshmallows on top and brown sugar and all that stuff. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I didn't even eat a stir fry. I did not have Asian food until I was in college when some of my roommates said, "Hey, let's go to this Chinese place." And I was like, "I don't think I like Chinese food." And they said, "Do you ever eat it?" And I said, "No, not really." I'll tell you, and I know because my mom's not watching this, so I can say that to me, Chinese food was, those cans of la choy.
I do know. Yes, yes.
That was Chinese food to me, and it was gross. I mean, it was disgusting. Like canned bean sprouts. Like who would eat that? And so we had white rice, and then this gloppy thing out of a can of la choy, and then the
crunchy noodles.
Yeah, the crunchy noodles. That was the only part I liked. Because
right.
The white rice and the crunchy noodles, because everything else was like, what is that? And it was gross looking. So I actually find that my friends said, "Hey, come on, I promise you'll like it." Oh my goodness. There was like a whole new world opened up to me at the age of 20. And I said, "What? This is delicious. Why did my parents never for Chinese food?" So I really vowed to never make that mistake. Like I'd never had Thai food, Indian food, anything other than just, Midwestern, white people food.
Very diet of Midwestern white people food.
Yes, it was. It was like, I mean, my dad was born and raised in Chicago until he was 8 and then moved to Wisconsin. And my mom was from Connecticut. So, I mean, it was like, but we ate what my dad wanted. So it was Midwestern white people food.
Right.
So,
understood.
So I didn't really get exposed to that. Therefore, I was kind of a picky eater because I didn't know.
For lack of exposure.
Lack of exposure. It was totally lack of exposure. And so, I mean, I love now, I mean, Indian food, Thai food, Chinese food, anything. Like I love it all. So it turned out I wasn't actually a picky eater. It was my dad who was the picky eater. And then, so it's super important to, as a parent, realize the example you're setting for a child. And we don't want our kids to be picky eaters because what it does is it limits the nutrients that they're getting. And that, I mean, we both know that the wider array of fruits and vegetables and things that we can get in us, that more healthy our gut microbiome will be. We need that wide array of fruits and vegetables and grains and beans. And I mean, it's just so good for us.
Right.
So it was certainly prevent an awful lot of the health issues that we see in our, older and even younger people. We can't even call it adult onset diabetes anymore, or, because children have type 2 diabetes now. So
right. And high blood pressure and heart disease and obesity and all of these things.
And all of it. And exactly.
And, the flip side of that is, we'll make this one last comment, and then you and I can jump to the Zoom screen. So thanks everybody who's watching this for hanging in there. Not only if we brought in the range and the variety of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains and lentils and beans and all of that thing, and not only does it keep us healthier because you're getting the phytonutrients and the micronutrients and the fiber, the things that haven't even been discovered yet.
Right.
I think the world of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains and the whole shebang around plant foods is like the universe. There's parts of it we have not discovered yet.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
But not only that, when a child is raised and encouraged or allowed to form themselves into this little box called picky eater, generally speaking, they're eating a lot of ultra processed foods.
Exactly.
Right? They're eating the chicken nuggets and the pepperoni pizza and the mac and cheese and all of this stuff that's super quick, easy. Too.
Combination of words, queasy.
Easy. Call it the quick, easy, relatively inexpensive stuff that we see on the kids menu at any restaurant. And those foods are full of all these additives that you were talking about in your presentation, the BHA, the BHT, and so much of it that I wrote, awful. So so we're setting our children on this path with a very narrow palate to prefer these foods that are bound to make them ill.
Right.
At the same time as excluding them or excluding foods that are bound to keep them healthy.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that we really need to consider when we're talking about, my child's the picky eater, he or she won't eat that or this or can't eat that. It is in their best interest and the whole family's best interest to eat as wide variety.
Probably some things at play too, besides just parents setting examples and things like that. There's also advertising. There's the yeah. So they want
palatability of all of those foods that make them, hard to refuse.
Exactly. So, yeah.
So with that, thanks so much, Carolyn. I could talk to you all day about stuff like this, and we do sometimes. Well, with that, I think you and I should jump over to the Zoom room. We could talk for another 15-20 minutes over there. Okay. For everyone else who is going to come back this evening around about 7:00 Central Time, we'll be meeting with Lee Crosby, who is a dietitian and a recipe creator. I believe she's way deep in the world of food science, and she'll be doing a cooking demo. Okay, so we'll see you back here then. And at this moment, Carol and I are going to jump off into the Zoom room, and thank you all so much. We'll see you this evening. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.